Hello and welcome. There's a little sunshine, and I'm taking this very welcome opportunity to dry out a little. And actually my outer robe is still a bit wet. I can even say wet as opposed to damp. But I've found over the years it dries more quickly on you than hanging up in certain environments. So this isn't sweating today, it's just humidity. And I think reflecting on the last 10 years or so, getting that way anyway, since I first left the UK in 2015, looking for an alternative way of life. Not so much seeking or then trying to find a way to become enlightened or even a holy person to show me that way, but just giving everything up really, letting go, not with that initial intention, it's just that seemed to be how it manifested. Renunciation. These ants, they stick. So leaving everything behind me and travelling, the thing I noticed on coming across not just monks, but renunciants, people doing much the same, and often monks, not just in Buddhism, but other religions also, there were amongst them, and I must say, by far the minority, not the majority, but amongst those communities, people you would meet that you felt suddenly more peaceful and relaxed, calm, content, and happy just to be around, because they felt that way. And living with them for a little while enabled me to mimic, copy their behavior, their routine, their patterns, and yes, their practice. And it isn't initially identifiable. You can't read it on a list or a book. But it becomes evident those are following in accordance with what we refer to in Buddhism, the Noble Eightfold Path, a virtuous and moral lifestyle, doing no harm, practicing meditation, developing wisdom through this process of renunciation and leading the samana life, the life of a renunciant, an ascetic to some extent, living in what can be perceived from a Westerner's, especially a Westerner's point of view, as a bit of a maybe uncomfortable life. But is it? When you actually try for yourself, you find that it is good enough. We are hardy beings. This wet, this damp, the hot. And yes, I mean, even yesterday afternoon, evening, last night, I felt cold, albeit it's above 25 degrees. That still feels, when you're wet, it feels cold in this part of the world. I'm not sure why that is, because if that's that temperature back in my country, in the UK, is t-shirts and shorts, kind of baking hot, ice creams and that kind of midsummer balmy weather. But here it's jolly chilly when it gets down to about 25. So living and experiencing life around these different kinds of samanas, monks, ascetics, and people just travelling, leading a different lifestyle to that which I'd become used to, I would occasionally come across people whom seem to have found what it is that I didn't know I was looking for at the time, but found quite appealing. And looking at it, it was quite simple. It was just the way they lived their life, simply. So trying to be like them, mimic them, and when we find Buddhism, we have the ideal subject for that, to try and be like the Buddha, mimic the Buddha, or his disciples, or in the lineage of that Sangha, the Buddha's first disciples, teachers in the modern age that form the Sangha, particular teachers we have an affinity to, can understand. But unless you have the opportunity to live and be around them, it's hard just from teachings and sutta readings and the technical jargon associated with Buddhism to really pick up that feeling and become that. So when given the opportunity to see how someone like that lives and have the opportunity to share with them what they're experiencing by their sharing with you, it's good to take advantage of that. And not to say, well, I do it this way, this teacher does it that way, I've heard this, I've heard that. But see, well look, they've actually got there. Let's just copy them. We don't go to the Buddha and say, how about this? I've heard this, I want to do it that way. What do you think? Or we don't go to the Buddha and say, tell me your thoughts on so-and-so, a philosopher from across the world and time. We simply see that he has attained to enlightenment, a noble being, and we try and be as best like that as we can ourselves. Now, as I say, they were few and far between. Even in large communities, you don't often, it's much to do with personalities also, but you don't often get to meet and be with people of that nature. But you can read these days many online biographies of such beings, monks, people who have practiced and have, it is said, attained to enlightenment even within their lifetimes, attained to nibbana. Those biographies and autobiographies are very inspiring to our practice. And this is much like reading the suttas, of course, because these are the words coming from the Buddha in many cases, as well as the commentaries added by his disciples and later commentators on these teachings. But the core teachings there of the Buddha are there for us to follow, are there for us to be able to copy the way he lived and the way he taught his disciples to live. So I personally don't question it. And coming across people, the many I have, albeit often hard to find amongst the many practitioners in communities that you do see, when you meet the odd, let's say, attained being, you're truly blessed with just their presence. And you can bathe in that presence, hoping that some of it will rub off. Much like if you were to be surrounded by, unsavory characters, for different reasons. Say you mixed in bars with the criminal elements of society, you would eventually start to act like them, very possibly, and even unintentionally. And when you mix with noble friends, kalyanamita, you start to actually behave in a kindly way also. But it does go deeper than that. It isn't just a learning process by rote and, well, if I do this chanting at this time, if I offer this dana at this time, if I pick these flowers on this particular day and offer it to this stupa at that location, this is starting to develop these rites and rituals that we're also trying to abandon. Because whether you do that or not will make no difference. It will enhance your practice, but overall the practice is to become really fully understanding of the Four Noble Truths, absolutely fully knowing there's suffering without unequivocally having any doubt over that. Its cause, getting to the root cause of the kilesas, the defilements, lobha dosa moha, greed, hatred and delusion. Cutting them off at the root, eradicating them. It's not a thing you can do, it's a gradual process and progression of living this way of life. You can also do that in lay life. You can compartmentalize your day. There are times when you have to concentrate on your bookwork, your manufacturing, your teaching, your listening, helping, whatever work line of occupation you have to be fully focused on that. Putting into practice that mindfulness that you're learning and developing more skillfully when sitting in meditation later on. It all merges together like this. It's all useful. So if you're on a telephone exchange selling insurance, use the skills you've learned sitting in samadhi when you're opening the mind to have insight, so as to clearly see the arising and passing away of all conditioned things, anicca, impermanence. So you clearly see dukkha, suffering, and you clearly see not self, anatta. Clearly seeing, we use the word, is the translation of the Pali word vipassana. That's what vipassana truly is. It's not a technique, it's a quality, insight, clearly seeing. Using that skill to clearly see, as you've developed it in samadhi, sharpening those tools, clearly see what you're doing and being able to listen. So you're selling insurance on the telephone. Really focus your attention on the voice of another. You'll notice they're stressed. You'll notice they're not at ease, outside of their comfort zone, maybe. You can put them at ease, bring them within their comfort zone. Allow yourself to listen a little bit longer to their story about the grandchildren, the dog, the next door neighbour. An extra few minutes even of listening gets you a long way in any activity. But it's also developing your skills. You'll identify what it is they want in that discussion. You'll identify their needs. And this can be when you're standing in the queue at the stop, waiting to get on the bus, or at the railway station, or you're sitting waiting for the aeroplane to take off to take you to your holiday destination, or a business meeting. Over coffee, anywhere. You can still be observing, watching yourself, your mannerisms, your bodily actions, how you are speaking to people, your speech. And watch your mind. Karma is acts of body, speech and mind. Actions. Action in the Noble Eightfold Path. Right action. After right view, right intention, right speech, right action. Notice your mind when you're listening to someone in conversation, or you're listening to a lecture, or you've asked a question and even you're fortunate to have your answer being explained to you. Watch your mind as it's thinking about not the answer, but what you're going to say next. And your next question. And bring it back. Do that by this. Just breathe in deeply through your nose. It's like the reins of a wild horse. Just a slow, deep breath in through your nose brings your focus of attention back to the body, and all of the bodily activities are only happening in the present moment, right here, right now. You've forgotten how the body felt even a minute ago. Unless there's a lingering pain or discomfort that continues into this moment, the past is gone, cannot be changed, and you can only imagine, guess, the future. This hasn't happened yet either. So be there in this present moment. And this is all part of integrating that practice and what you pick up from others into environments where it doesn't seem that they're conducive to practice at all. In fact, they are. They are opportunities to put those skills into practice. Not even challenges. You have a toolbox full of equipment. It's a very simple toolbox because you have the multi-tools of the Noble Eightfold Path, which contains all of the answers. You see a monk sitting quietly, peacefully, meditating. You spend enough time around them, you just do the same. Or you can say, well, what about if I focus on a candle? Or what about if I do Kundalini? Or what about if I meditate with my eyes open, staring at a wall? Or what about, you could waste that opportunity doing that. Someone calls you at the call center wanting to buy ABC. You guarantee you can sell them ABC. And maybe when that is established, you might add on. What comes next? D, E, F. You don't say, well, no, what about D, E, F? Go away and think about D, E, F. I'm not going to sell you ABC now. Go away and think about D, E, F and call me tomorrow. You would never do that, would you? I apologize for equating Dharma to the sales environment, but I found a lot of the skills I learnt in business, in training, before leaving that all behind in 2015, have become very useful in my practice, in the ability to listen, pick up, learn, to mimic, to copy, to be like, to change one's ordinary actions of body, speech and mind, not to be unrecognizable as an individual, but to operate in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path and live more peacefully and harmoniously with all other beings, from the mosquito to the abbot of a huge community of monks. From an unheard of local stranger to well-known figures in modern day society. To be able to just blend and fit in. And this is what the Buddha teaches us. It isn't complicated. It's a simple way of living. So I was asked this question, which got me to thinking of that. If I can make this work again. Is it okay to keep the eyes open while meditating? Well, why would you want to, is what I would ask you. And yes, it's actually okay for you to do anything you like. It's okay for you to, I know the question is relating to technique, but are there many people you have met, come across, that say, have your eyes open whilst you're meditating? I think you'll hear in certain teachings, in certain schools, that you may stare at one colour, a blank wall, a candle. This they call kasina meditation. But why? Why do you need any more distraction? That might bring your focus, and that's using a block colour, a light, something to look at, as a meditation object. It's not in addition to. But if you're using your breath as the meditation object, then you would want to have your eyes closed. Because why have any other distraction? Indeed, if you could close your ears, it would be good, but you can't. It's enough of a distraction, let alone things passing through your field of vision. So is it okay? Everything's okay. There's no real rules. You're a practitioner, even if you're a monk. Monks aren't always meditators. A very senior monk came to see me here with many qualifications, written many books, telling me all about this. And after my bows and paying respect to him, I asked, so how long do you meditate for each and every day? And he didn't really answer. He didn't answer at first, but to say, "Oh, we don't do that here in Sri Lanka," which I chuckle at, because, of course, to me, I think it's really the most essential, or it's 1/3 of the practice, let's say, if not more than that. But anyway, eventually I asked again. I know that it's fair to ask a question up to 3 times. If then you don't get an answer, you should really leave it alone. But I said, no, really, seriously, each day, how do you meditate? Yes. And the answer was 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon or in the evening. So I then thought, well, I'll leave this questioning there and go back to listening. And it's quite clear that this is the meditation that is carried out in the evening, morning puja and evening puja, and that's about the extent of it. A very, very busy and important individual, running 19 monasteries, which are schools, and doing all sorts of different work here in this country. That's a whole different side of the practice. A whole different area of the practice. Not what I do here. And what I do here, and more specifically with these talks in this video format, is share with you what I do here. Not in any organized or pre-planned way, not in a way to analyze the teachings of the Buddha, Because if you're watching me and have been watching this for any length of time, you'll know, as far as I'm concerned, that's as it is, that's as read. So I haven't got it here, but I heard another comment came through just recently that it hasn't made the list yet, but it will, was, please can I speak on my thoughts with regards to the Angulimala Sutta. My thoughts on the Angulimala Sutta is that every Buddhist should read it. I don't know the number in the Majjhima Nikaya, or even if that's the correct part of the Sutta Pitaka, but you can Google Angulimala Sutta and read it for yourself, because it is an essential teaching of the Buddha that we must understand and is self-explanatory. Now, there is an area towards the end which is a bit of a koan, where the Angulimala is trying to catch up with the Buddha. But I leave it at that, because the Buddha in his teaching of that sutta leaves it at that. It is a koan, it's no answer in some respects, but in others it is the overall answer to everything we're trying to achieve here. So what are my thoughts on that? My thoughts are that you should read it, and whatever comes up in your mind is what the Buddha intends for you to get from that teaching. Not what I think of it, not my interpretation of it, not my adaptation of it. No, no, no. Those suttas are there for you to read, for you to understand, as I have and I do, without question. You may have questions in your mind of some commentaries, some versions, some translations. Don't get bogged down in all of that. It doesn't matter, does it? The gist of the story's there. Don't pick on the certain word or the semantics of one phrase or another, one translator or another. Some of the oldest translations are very good, but in a very old English, which if English isn't your mother tongue, mightn't necessarily be as obvious as if it's your mother tongue, and therefore less off-putting. Or you may find it more attractive in that form. But often people try to modernize these teachings also, which they don't so much do in other religions. You don't often, there are some modern churches, but you don't often hear the priest or the vicar in a Christian church reading the Psalms or liturgy, I think they call it, but quotes from the Bible in a modern way. They're read quite literally and read from the book, as many people these days are reading the suttas. But in the old translations, the King James version is very common of the Bible, the Christian Bible, in many Christian churches. Well, that was written in the time of King James. Now, when was he around? I don't even know. I mean, that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And it's the language that's used then as just as satisfactory a translation as the more modern versions, really, because the gist of what's being said there is contained within the stories, the Psalms themselves. And this is the same with the suttas. So that's why I don't sit here with a computer screen in front of me reading suttas. Frankly, I don't see the point. I do use that, though, because there's some very good monks doing that for us all. So if ever I come across those in the few channels that I subscribe to listen to Dharma talks, if one does come up, I'll usually listen to it with interest, because it's a reminder of what I've read before. And then they may have some discussion about it afterwards. There may be different opinions and different views. So there's nothing wrong with that, and I wholeheartedly recommend doing that. But I don't do that myself, so I often am asked to do that. But then I wouldn't be able to do what I am doing, which is just sitting here talking to you, talking to people which is as much, well, I hope it's to others' benefit, but it's certainly to my benefit, because by talking about the Dharma, we're reinforcing what we think we know. And I say what we think we know because very often as I'm speaking, I'll be thinking, well, or is it like that? And then I'll retract and say, well, you could put it more like this way. So we're airing our thoughts, airing our views. And when you don't have someone to speak to, as I don't, apart from the cat, then this is a very good opportunity for me to do that. So another comment here that's a little unrelated to what I've just been discussing, but I think I've talked about that enough now, is if I could report from my first Samadhi experiences, and in what way they might have had an impact, influence on your further practice as a monk. Well, we don't talk of our own experiences, whether it be in terms of attainments in our meditation practice, that is. I can talk about my travels coming here and the bus journey or something like that, but jhanas, stages of samadhi, levels of enlightenment, these are not encouraged to be discussed amongst anyone other than with your teachers, your advisors, with people within your own peer group. So without being specific, I came to meditation before Buddhism. It was so good, I got interested in Buddhism, found that even improved my meditation, which led me to look a bit further into Buddhism, which began my travels. And therefore, eventually, I became a monk, having established quite quickly that giving things up was a lot more satisfying than trying to get things. So acquisition was causing me suffering, whereas renunciation was giving me a great deal of happiness and contentment. So I started to follow that direction more and more. So that's the result and the impact and the influence that it had on my further practice. It was like a snowballing effect. As soon as you get some joy and pleasure and bliss out of meditation, it starts to roll down the hill, grow and grow and grow and grow and quick. The growth is exponential. I can't say that word, but exponential. The growth is like that. From a small seed, a great oak tree may grow, or an acorn. Irrelevant if you don't have oak trees in your country. So steering away from that. But this is really, what you see here, where I am now, doing what I'm doing, is not as a result of anything other than following and practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, the teachings of the Buddha, and then trying to emulate his practice, do what he did. What would the Buddha do in this situation? What would his disciples do in this situation? How do monks behave? Those that have been ordained and are keeping more precepts than us as lay people, from a lay person's point of view. That's what I was looking at. And then when I saw even enlightened beings I've had the pleasure to be around and be amongst, I saw the benefits of that further renunciation. So it isn't just samadhi alone. And I can't say I can remember some significant moments in my practice that I don't necessarily need to highlight. But they've been in the most unlikely situations, certainly not situations you would think would be conducive towards meditation, but have actually saved me in those situations and enabled those situations to be fruitful and beneficial to my practice, as opposed to a hindrance. So that's hopefully useful. I didn't look at the time again. So, just finish with a couple of short questions. I have trouble with sitting still. It says brackets medication. So it's either due to medication or it meant to say, and it's a mistype, meditation. But it doesn't matter. You have trouble sitting still. That's understandable. It's one of the hardest things for people to do. Many people that have come to see me, I'll sit and watch, and it never ceases to amaze me how much people move. Even monks, they don't sit still. You ask someone to sit in a room and not move and sit still, it's like torture to them. It's only through the practice of meditation that we develop this skill. But gradually build that up, and then you ask me, can I show you, please maybe show us walking meditation? And yeah, I have made a video whilst I was back in Thailand showing walking meditation, and I'll do another. I'll update all of these videos at some point in the future. There's usually always an excuse. It's either at the moment too wet, then it'll be too hot, but there will come a time when the opportunity will arise again, and I will update the sitting postures. That's always a bit of a difficult one, because what do I wear? It's not like I can put demonstrative clothing on to show you how my legs are positioned. But it's not that important, just sit still. For walking meditation, I sent this person the link, and if you just search on this channel, English Buddhist Monk, walking meditation, it'll come up. And this is a very generous offer from someone, and I do appreciate it, but no thank you for the time being. I know you want to keep things simple, but as you're already teaching online, perhaps a Chromebook and an air card might make it easier to read the questions. So I'm not even sure exactly what those things are, but really the setup I have now is very simple. 2 cheap smartphones, which hopefully provide as good a quality as is necessary currently for you to hear my talks clearly, or I use this special microphone thing to enable the hearing part of it and see, something. But with regards to my often maybe continual moans about reading the questions, actually it doesn't really matter what I'm reading the questions on, or if I'm wearing, people have kindly sent in donations that have enabled me to order online and get some glasses, reading glasses set in. But the problem with my reading is not so much the focus, because my eyes are pretty much in focus. It's when I'm reading smallish letters, and I appreciate what you're saying with a bigger screen, that would be easier. But I have some damage in my eyes, which there's a dot in the way. But the reason I moan is not any of those reasons. Is I like nice, concise questions, or I have to find the question in the context. And someone recently sent a very good question that had the question right at the start, and then it even was headed optional context, and then the whole background, because it's also useful, because sometimes I do need to know the background as to where the question's coming from. But if I have to find a question in a whole essay, I simply don't have the time or inclination to do that. If it doesn't then fit on the screen, because I just screenshot on the phone these comments and questions, and then read them out later, so that I don't have to go looking for them on the wherever they come from. So each question, each comment is a screenshot. That's what I'm flicking through. That has proven to be the simplest and easiest way for me to do this, and I'm very happy with it. So as long as everyone else is happy with it, that's the way I'd like it to continue. But I do appreciate the very kind offer. Thank you very much. Also, everything I take with me when I move from this place and go to another, if I ever do, but going back, when I've come from any place to eventually this place, I never take anything with me than my requisites and what I can fit in that bowl. So if a Chromebook, air card, these 2 phones and the little stand it's on and the microphones with my passport don't fit in that bowl, then it doesn't come with me, it gets left here. So like the electric fan that's been provided by you will be left here for someone else to benefit from. There is a refrigerator, a kettle, which I use, they will be left here for the next person to enjoy, to use for their benefit. Anything I acquire whilst in a place, so I try to only accept things that might be useful to someone else. Someone wanted to offer zafu cushions and things like that for me to sit on. Well, I don't use the cushions, and there's no point really storing those up even for the benefit of other people. I prefer, if they're coming to meditate with me, that they bring their own, because they just get wet and damp. So it's something that I would have to be regularly, even if it's not in use, which it wouldn't be, hanging out in the sun to dry, clean, and it isn't necessary. So unless it's the bare essential necessary requisites, I am just using. Even these phones I'm using. They belong to you, I'm using them for this purpose. I don't have much else use for them. I don't make phone calls or message people that often. My mother once every couple of weeks, few weeks really. I'm not getting very good at that because I kind of run out of things to say, but I use these skills of listening to all of her wonderful stories about the family and who's doing what and this and that. But even so, it's none of it really that relevant to my fields of interest, and certainly what I'm doing is not relevant to my family's fields of interests. So another question, a comment that comes up later on that I haven't got in front of me, but was that, well, someone was pleased to know that I speak with my family, and another was asking, am I able? Is it okay then as a monk to speak to your family? Well, there isn't really much need to. And when you do, what do you say? Because they don't really want to hear what I'm saying to you today here. They would consider that as being a bit of an odd thing to hear coming from me. You must remember I come from somewhere far away, a different culture, a different background, a different environment. And that started in about 2015. And something I've never done in all of these travels is really taken photographs. But there are occasions when I've had to, I've been forced to really, because people have said, oh, you should really take a photograph of this. So just out of respect, I've let them take a photograph, or I've taken a photograph, and then I've got a bit carried away and taken several. So over the last coming up 10 years, have collected quite a few photographs, but really by comparison to most people who even go on a week's holiday, let alone travelling around for 10 years, I haven't got very many photographs at all. You get these, you might not, when you go in to see where these videos are recorded and then they store, before you put them on YouTube, into the photograph album in Google, up comes these, what they call memories, or little collages of the pictures. And I kind of skip through them and ignore them. But I watched one by chance today, and they're only half a minute long. And there's an automatic way I can put them on YouTube. It requires no effort whatsoever. So as they come up, I'll just let them go on to YouTube, which are pictorial. They say a picture paints 1,000 words. They are a pictorial reference of my travels to date, since about 2015, living in a van in the UK, going to Thailand. They don't really highlight the pandemic. There's one very interesting picture of underground station, subway station in the middle of London at rush hour, completely empty, because I was the only person on the train and in the station, it seemed, at the time. Mid-lockdown, but I had some reason to be out. I was going to the embassy to get a visa. It was a necessary part of my life at the time. So Yes, these pictures come up, and I found a way I can put them on here just to share with you, and I'll put them into a playlist called Travel. So quite separate from what we're talking about here. And if you go to the channel page, however that manifests itself in front of your eyes, there are playlists of that subject: travel, monk's life, guided meditations, chanting, Dharma, and questions and answers. So if you only want to listen to Dharma talks, just listen to the talks on that playlist. I only want to listen to questions and answers, that one, and so on. But someone also asked if I could put titles to say what the particular insight I will be discussing today is in the titles accurately, you know. The reason I'm very poor at that is because I talk about all manner of things, not one particular thing each time we begin. I might set out to talk about something as I did today and end up talking about what I'm talking about now. So I can only pick a highlight. The short videos that appear did have titles, which were those highlights. Well, I wouldn't necessarily, they might be lowlights. They're just randomly picked shorts from the video. But as I don't think the titles make much difference because people don't choose to look at those, I think they just get put on YouTube. I don't know how it really works, but anyway, I've given up putting titles on those. It's just another thing to do. I just let everything be. So their advice was that this way then the channel would grow. Well, I have no intention for it to grow. If it grows, it grows. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It doesn't matter. It has grown, and I like to think it's grown how I can only describe it as organically, in the sense that hopefully the people watching, the subscribers to this channel, are watching and listening, and clearly from the comments they're making are interested in the Dharma, not just because they've accidentally or been forced to subscribe because they think they should, or they've seen just one video and never watched it again. They're actually people, as you'll find with most Dharma channels, Buddhist channels, that are in themselves a little group of Kalyanamita, a lay Sangha, a group of people enjoying the Dharma, as opposed to millions and millions of viewers who are just looking at the pretty pictures and hearing the pretty sounds and an alternative viewing distraction. That's a whole different thing. So not wanting it to be that, it isn't promoted in any such ways. In fact, any assistance with the promotion of this channel that comes through by Google or by third parties, I ignore and get rid of and don't do anything about it, because it's good enough what it's doing as far as I know. But I'm always open to suggestions, so I am grateful for those comments and suggestions in that respect. So on that note, I'm sure I've spoken over my time. Not that there's any particular rule on that either, but usually 40 minutes to an hour is sufficient. Be happy and stay well. Until next time, Sukhi Hotu.